They told me she was a monster, 11 feet tall, eyes like molten gold, strong enough to crush a man in seconds. They said anyone who fed her would die. But when I did, she didn't kill me. She saved me. And now she refuses to let me go. The corridors of the Atlas research facility felt like they had no end, cold metallic tunnels humming with the sound of machines that never slept. Ethan Cross adjusted his security badge as he walked, the air thick with disinfectant and secrets. He'd been here only a week, but the place already felt like it was swallowing him whole. Every hallway looked the same. Every camera eye followed his every step. Most guards avoided the far end of sub-level 6. That was where she was kept. Subject X9, the alien giantess. 11 feet of silent fury locked behind reinforced titanium walls. There were warning signs plastered everywhere. No direct contact, no feeding, no eye contact. To most people, that meant stay away. To Ethan, it sounded like an invitation. He'd heard the stories during orientation, how she'd crushed a man's helmet like a soda can, how she hadn't eaten in days because the scientists wanted to test her endurance. It's not torture, they said. It's research. But Ethan had been a soldier long enough to recognize cruelty dressed as science. That night, after most of the facility had gone dark, he lingered near her cell. A single light flickered above the viewing panel, casting flashes of blue across her shadow. Even sitting, she looked colossal, chains biting into her wrists, her breathing shallow, steady, almost human. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Then he muttered to himself, "You've officially lost it," and made his way to the mess hall. He filled a tray with the leftovers, nutrient stew, hard bread, purified water. Nothing special, but more than what she'd been given for days. When he returned, his pulse thudded against his ribs. He crouched by the feeding slot, the metal cold under his hands. "Easy does it," he whispered, sliding the tray inside. For a long second, nothing happened. Then movement. A massive hand, pale blue and trembling, reached forward. It brushed his fingers, gentle as breath. Not violent, not hostile, just contact. Ethan froze, breath caught halfway in his chest. Her skin felt warm, real, alive. When she withdrew, the tray vanished into the shadows. He stayed there, kneeling on the cold floor, listening to the soft scrape of utensils. Somewhere behind him, the corridor lights flickered again. And for the first time since he arrived at Atlas, Ethan felt something this place had long forgotten: compassion. The next night, Ethan told himself he wouldn't go back. He tried drowning his guilt in cheap coffee and meaningless paperwork, but every flicker on the security monitor pulled his eyes to cell X9. She hadn't moved in hours. The longer he watched that motionless silhouette, the more something inside him twisted. A mix of worry and defiance he couldn't explain. Near midnight, he found himself walking that same corridor again, the air heavy with recycled oxygen and faint static from the intercoms. The guards on duty barely looked up when he passed. No one wanted to be near that cell after dark. He stopped at the viewing panel. She was awake this time. Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting the world like liquid gold. Ethan almost turned away, until she tilted her head as if she could see him through the glass. "You shouldn't look at me like that," he muttered, half to himself. "You'll get us both killed." Still, he found himself lowering another tray to the feeding slot. This time, no hesitation. The hand that reached out was steadier, her movement slower, deliberate, curious. The massive fingers brushed the edge of the tray and then paused. She was waiting, watching him, learning. He knelt and whispered, "It's just food." Not a trick. The faintest vibration ran through the metal floor, like a soft hum from her throat. It wasn't threatening, more like a question. Then she began arranging the pieces of bread into a pattern. A circle, then a smaller one beside it. Two shapes, two beings. Ethan felt his throat tighten. "You're smarter than they think, aren't you?" Behind him, the door hissed open. Footsteps. He spun around. It was Captain Rice, his rival from the barracks, leaning against the wall with a mocking grin. "Feeding your pet again, Cross? Cute. When she bites your arm off, don't expect sympathy." Ethan didn't answer. Rice left with a laugh, but the tension lingered. When Ethan turned back, the tray was empty, and the giantess was still watching him, unmoving, unblinking, yet somehow gentle. Before he left, she pressed her palm flat against the glass. Slowly, Ethan raised his own to match it. Cold separated them, but for a heartbeat it felt like connection. And that was the moment he realized. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was trust. By the fourth night, Ethan knew he'd crossed a line. He wasn't supposed to care. Guards didn't care. Soldiers didn't care. But every time he saw her trapped behind that glass, something inside him cracked a little more. He tried to act normal during his shift, keeping his eyes on his console, pretending to ignore the whispers that followed him down the hallways. That's the guy who keeps visiting the monster. The label didn't bother him anymore. What bothered him was the sound that came from Cell X9's speakers that evening. A low, distressed growl that almost sounded like pain. When he checked the monitoring screen, her heart rate was dropping again. They were starving her on purpose, testing how long her body could survive without nourishment. Ethan slammed his fist against the table. "This isn't research," he muttered. "It's torture." Against every protocol, he took another tray from the kitchen and walked straight to her cell. The corridors were eerily empty. Even the cameras had gone dark for maintenance. It felt like fate was silently opening the path for him. When he reached her cell, she was kneeling near the door, eyes fixed on the small slot like she had been waiting for him. Her gaze softened when she saw him. For the first time, Ethan spoke clearly, his voice quiet but firm. "They're trying to kill you," he said. "But I'm not letting that happen." Her lips parted, and the faintest sound escaped, broken syllables, unsure but real. "Kill you?" He froze. She had understood. Ethan nodded slowly. "Not me. You. They're going to end you if we don't do something." She tilted her head, confusion flickering behind those golden eyes. Then she said one word that sent chills down his spine. "Run." The lights above them flickered violently. Alarms screamed. Someone had overridden the system. Through the intercom, Captain Rice's voice echoed. "Security breach, Cell X9. Target engaged." Ethan barely had time to react before the walls trembled. The giantess rose, chains snapping like brittle wires. She didn't charge, didn't roar. She just reached toward him, enormous, graceful, and heartbreakingly calm. "Together," she said, her voice clearer now. And when the lockdown sirens blared, Ethan didn't run away. He ran with her. The facility had become a nightmare of flashing alarms, echoing gunfire, and shouted commands. Ethan's boots splashed through puddles of coolant as he sprinted beside Lyra, the name he'd finally whispered to her when they fled. She moved with terrifying grace, ducking under low ceilings, her chains clanging behind her like the echoes of a past she was desperate to shed. The corridors shook as the automated defenses activated. Metal shutters slammed down, sealing paths one by one. "Left!" Ethan shouted, and she followed without hesitation, her massive hands tearing through a barrier like it was cardboard. He had no plan, no map, only the instinct to keep her alive. A burst of gunfire ricocheted down the hallway. Ethan shoved her behind a bulkhead and fired back, his pulse rifle trembling in his grip. "Don't kill them," she murmured, her voice hoarse but steady. "No more killing." The words struck him harder than any bullet. Even now, when she had every reason to fight back, she wanted peace. They pushed deeper into the maintenance tunnels, where the walls dripped condensation and the air smelled like rust. Ethan's lungs burned, but Lyra kept glancing down at him, adjusting her stride to match his pace. It was absurd, an 11-foot alien slowing down for a human. Over the comms, a familiar voice crackled through static. "Dr. Venn." "Ethan, listen to me. There's an emergency freight elevator in sub-level 9. It leads to the surface. You can still make it, but the warden has authorized a purge. You have maybe 10 minutes before the entire level floods with toxin." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then we'd better move." When they reached the shaft, the elevator platform was gone. Just an open vertical tunnel stretching into darkness. He looked up, then at Lyra. She understood before he spoke. Without a word, She crouched, lifted him onto her shoulder and began climbing. Her fingers dug into the steel walls, pulling them higher and higher as alarms wailed below. Halfway up, the structure shuddered from an explosion. A metal panel gave way, slicing across her arm. Blue blood spilled, sizzling against the steel. "Lyra!" he shouted. She just gritted her teeth and climbed faster. When they finally reached the hatch, she threw it open, and the cold night air hit them like freedom itself. They didn't stop to look back. The lab, the cruelty, the past, everything burned behind them. They had escaped. But freedom, Ethan knew, was only the beginning. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast, silent and silver under the cold glow of 2 moons. Ethan stumbled through the sand, his body aching from exhaustion, but he refused to slow down. Behind him, Lyra moved like a wounded mountain, her steps heavy, her breath ragged. The slash across her arm still bled faintly, glowing blue under the starlight. "Just a little farther," Ethan said, half to her, half to himself. His voice cracked. "We'll find shelter soon." Lyra tilted her head, studying him as if confused by the fragility in his tone. "You hurt?" she asked softly. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wheeze. "You're the one bleeding glowing paint, remember?" Her lips curved slightly, her version of a smile. For a fleeting second, it almost felt normal. They reached a ridge, where the remains of an old research outpost stood half buried in sand. Ethan helped her inside, guiding her toward a broken console that flickered faintly with power. "We can rest here, for tonight at least." She sank to the floor with a sigh, chains clinking softly as she shifted her weight. Despite her size and strength, there was something heartbreakingly gentle about her now, something human. Ethan patched her wound with what little medical gel he had left. His hands shook, but her eyes stayed on him the whole time, calm and trusting. "Why help me?" she asked, voice quiet as wind. He met her gaze, tired but certain. "Because they never saw you. They only saw what scared them. I saw someone who deserved better." For a long time she said nothing. Then she reached out, one massive hand hovering inches from his face, hesitant, like she'd learned what gentleness costs. When he didn't flinch, she rested her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "Alive," she murmured. "Because you fed me," Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess we saved each other." Outside, engines rumbled in the distance, search drones sweeping the horizon. Their time was running out. Ethan rose, grabbing his pack. "We can't stay." "They'll come for us." Lyra stood slowly, towering but resolute. "Then we go. Together." As dawn painted the dunes gold, they vanished into the horizon. One human, one giant, bound not by fear, but by a promise neither of them fully understood. And somewhere deep inside him, Ethan knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything.